Welcome to Notebook Summaries. In this explainer, we're tracing the epic history of Tajikistan, a nation forged at the crossroads of great empires.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start way back with the ancient civilizations, then see how a parade of empires left their mark. We'll touch on the local khanates before diving into how Russia and the Soviet Union completely reshaped the country, which all leads up to its tough road to independence.
All right, first up, ancient civilizations, the foundation of it all. We're talking 600 BC to 710 AD.
So when we ask who were the first Tajiks, we're really talking about people with incredibly deep roots. Their ancestors lived in these almost mythical lands, Sogdiana and Bactria. And this wasn't just some random spot on the map, it was the heart of a major Bronze Age civilization. And get this, a lot of scholars think Bactria is where the prophet Zoroaster was born. That means this land was literally the cradle for one of the world's oldest religions. It's a huge piece of the puzzle for understanding Tajik identity today.
Okay, next up, the Age of Empires. For centuries, this whole region was basically a prized possession for anyone with a big enough army.
And what an age it was. I mean, look at this timeline. It's like a who's who of ancient superpowers. First, the massive Persian Empire rolls in. Then, boom, Alexander the Great shows up, bringing Greek culture with him. After that, the Kushan Empire rises, and they were a big deal, right up there with Rome and Han China. Then comes a really pivotal moment. The Arab Caliphate arrives and introduces Islam, which changes everything. And just to top it all off, the Mongols sweep through and just level legendary cities like Bukhara and Samarkand. Every single one of these conquests left a deep, lasting mark.
But it wasn't all just about war and conquest. In between these huge invasions, local powers had a chance to shine. And under the Samanid Empire, the first real local dynasty after the Arabs, cities like Bukhara and Samarkand had an absolute golden age. They weren't just cities, they became these incredible hubs of Persian art, science, and literature, shining a light for the whole region.
So after those giant empires started to fade, things got a bit messy. Power became more local, which also meant the land became much more fractured.
Yeah, by the 1700s, the idea of a single unified land for the Tajiks was gone. Instead, it was split between these two rival states, both ruled by Turkic dynasties, the Khanate of Bukhara in the west and the Khanate of Kokand over in the east. And all this infighting, well, it basically put up a giant welcome sign for the next big power looking to expand its territory.
And that brings us to Russian and Soviet rule. And this is a game changer, because when the Russians arrived, they didn't just conquer the place, they fundamentally re-engineered the entire society from the ground up.
This whole period was just one massive upheaval after another. You have the Russian conquest kicking off in the 1860s, which sparked this long, drawn-out resistance. But ultimately, the Soviets won out and absorbed the region completely. First, they tucked it inside Uzbekistan, but then they carved out a separate Tajik Soviet Socialist Republic. And it stayed that way right up until the whole Soviet Union just fell apart in 1991.
Let's talk a bit more about that resistance, because it was a big deal. It's known as the Basmachi movement. It actually started as a protest against Russia forcing Central Asians to fight in World War I. But after the communists took over, it exploded into a full-on guerrilla war against Soviet rule that raged for years.
And this is maybe one of the most important things to understand about the Soviet era. When they were drawing the new borders on the map, they made a decision that has had consequences to this very day. They took ancient, historic Tajik cultural centers, we're talking cities like Bukhara and Samarkand, and drew the line so they ended up inside the Uzbek Republic, not the Tajik one. A huge decision.
And at the exact same time, Moscow was actively pushing for Russians to move into the area. The change was just staggering. I mean, look at these numbers. The Russian population went from less than 1% to over 13% in just about 30 years. This completely changed the demographic landscape and pretty much guaranteed that Russians held all the key jobs.
And finally, independence and civil war. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 should have been this amazing moment. But for Tajikistan, independence also unleashed something absolutely terrible.
Almost immediately, the country just collapsed into a horrific civil war that lasted 5 years. This wasn't a simple conflict. It was fought between different factions, often based on these really old regional and clan loyalties. The estimated death toll? Over 100,000 people. Just devastating.
And the human cost goes way beyond that. The war created 1.2 million refugees. That's more than 1 million people forced from their homes, either somewhere else in the country or fleeing abroad. It left the nation in absolute ruins.
So, how do they pull back from the brink? Well, it was a slow process. Emomali Rahman, who is actually still the president today, came to power in '94. The real turning point was a peace deal signed in 1997, which led to the first elections after the war. From there, a very fragile peace began to take hold, and the country could finally start the long, slow process of putting itself back together.
So, when you look at the whole story, from being this crossroads of empires to a sovereign nation today, you see a history of incredible cultural achievement, but also of foreign domination and brutal internal conflict. And it leaves you with this big question. How does a nation so defined by its past navigate its own path forward in the 21st century?
Hey, if you found this history as fascinating as I do, we've got a whole playlist of these quick country histories you should definitely check out. And make sure you subscribe to Notebook Summaries so you don't miss what's next. Thanks so much for watching.